Moon Knight is one of my favorite Marvel characters ever. I absolutely love him. Everything about Moon Knight rocks. The lore, the idea behind the character itself, all top-notch stuff. And although I love the character so much, my feelings and expectations towards the show were kinda mixed. On one side, how do you fuck up Moon Knight? But on the other hand, I ask myself that about many Marvel characters, that they somehow managed to not make that great. WandaVision was kind of a mess. Falcon and Winter Soldier were good, but not really that great. Nothing special. Loki was great. Hawkeye was a huge disappointment for me, so I was asking myself, can they do it? Can they do something great and most importantly different? Because you have to make Moon Knight different. You can't make just another MCU movie / show just with Moon Knight. No, you have to differentiate yourself. And surprisingly, but not really, they somehow managed to do that. Because Moon Knight, the TV show, is possibly one of the most unique MCU things ever, maybe? At least since Ragnarok? This show, through its 6-episode runtime, does something that I was asking Marvel and MCU to do for years, and they never even tried to deliver on that, which is at least some level of creative freedom that was at least similar to the comic books. Marvel Comics does a lot of different stuff in terms of styles, creative ideas, even genres sometimes, levels of violence. Marvel sometimes even doesn't do a typical superhero, which looking at MCU sounds like a complete abstract. MCU movies are mostly indistinguishable. They seem like the same movie. If they are not directed by James Gunn or Taika Waititi, they are basically the same movie. You don't see that much creativity. They are just basic superhero movies. You could say that MCU basically created the template, but it's boring. There is no fun with the genres, so because of that, these movies feel like we just see the same story over and over and over again. Well, Moon Knight comes to the rescue, because this show isn't really a superhero show, except the last episode maybe. It's mostly an Indiana Jones-esque adventure TV show with some elements of superhero, of course. And what surprises me the most is psychological horror, which, saying this about MCU anything, doesn't seem real. This show just doesn't get stale like most of the Marvel movies and TV shows these days. Moon Knight is changing, Moon Knight is evolving, Moon Knight is constantly adding new ideas, which makes this show feel alive, which I know seems like a really basic thing to say, but talking about MCU these days, this is a treat. This, in terms of creativity, maybe doesn't feel like comic book levels, but it is at least trying to get to that level. Moon Knight is one of the most creatively written characters in Marvel Comics, so you had to bring out the big guns. And bring out the big guns they did, which I appreciate. Probably the most versatile character in Marvel Comics. Every single series that he's in is completely different than the ones that came before it. So the bar was set pretty high, and so not only my expectations were higher, so it's only fitting that the show itself is completely wild. But of course, there wouldn't be a Moon Knight without the man behind the mask. And let me just say, Mark Spector in this show is gold. I don't want to spoil too much, because I feel like this is the type of the show that the less you know, the more fun you will have with the intrigue and figuring out what is going on. But I have to say that the motive of the split personality that Mark Spector had in comic books is shown in an absolutely excellent way. At first it was a really interesting intrigue, but the more we and the main character learned about what really is going on, and the more the show progresses, it goes in a very interesting way where you and them start feeling an emotional connection to all the split personalities, and it is an absolute joy to watch. The journey that they go with this concept is fascinating, and it adds an amount of emotional drama that MCU probably never had. This show is unreal. It is abstract. The show feels so above everything, and this part of the story puts it down to earth when we can understand and like the main character, which MCU honestly sometimes fails to do. They learn from each other and they become better because of it. This is easily the best character storyline in MCU's history. Pure greatness with emotional drama that keeps you attached to the TV because you want Mark but also the other ones to succeed. It is a complete must-watch stuff, no joke. Even if you don't really like superhero shows, yeah, this show you gotta watch. Also, a make or break part about this show was picking the right actor to play Mark Spector, because when you think about it, the guy has to play at least two characters and all of them completely different from each other. Most of the show will be him basically talking to himself and he has to sell it. And you know what? Oscar Isaac is absolutely perfect. This guy puts the show on completely another level. This is the best acting performance in history of this universe by far, no joke. I know we have great actors in MCU. He easily outclassed every single one of them. And I just came back from Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is great. Benedict Cumberbatch is great. Oscar Isaac, different level. He manages to pull a dialogue completely alone with himself. You are unable to stop watching. He makes them so compelling. When normally you would compare an actor to like a singer, a drummer, whatever, in a rock band. Oscar Isaac is the entire fucking band. He's in absolute god mode. The rest of the human characters, there is not a lot of them, but they are good, but let's be honest, nowhere near the main character, which is good because this show was supposed to be about Mark Spector. It should be about Mark Spector. Nobody should steal the light from him, and nobody does, which is good and bad at the same time. Layla is cool. She's a decent addition to the story. She adds a lot of human drama to Moon Knight, which is great, and basically her main purpose is to be that character that Mark will have human interactions with, which is not much, but she does it perfectly fine. Good writing, good acting. She brings this great level of humanity to this character, because it is really difficult to pull off both the drama of Mark Spector and the absolute batshit craziness of Moon Knight, and she's a great part of why these two parts work together so well, and her interactions with different personalities are golden. Arrow is a decent but honestly not really remarkable villain. I feel like if Ethan Hawke wasn't playing him, he would be completely forgettable and we would forget him like next month when whatever next MCU TV show comes out. But he brings a few moments of absolute gold to this character, and in one episode he is, let's just say, interest. Khonshu, on the other hand, is perfect. Honestly, he is perfect. First of all, he looks great, which is surprising. Second of all, I love the fact that they didn't try to make Khonshu like a more good, more of a positive thing in Mark's life. No, Khonshu is an absolutely manipulating dick, and you hate him. He always knows what to say, when to say, to use and manipulate Mark, which is exactly how I would imagine Khonshu in this show. You have this lost Mark Spector that doesn't really know what he's doing, what's going on, and Khonshu is supposed to be the manipulator who basically takes away his life just because he needs someone to fight for him. You know that he is no good, and the show isn't trying to hide that, which is great, because I was scared that they will make Khonshu this great, cool, like, I don't know, mentor maybe of Mark, but no, Khonshu is terrible, as he's supposed. I will not complain in a single bit, he's great, but it couldn't be all sunshine and rainbows, could it? So show, as they always do, they absolutely butchered the ending. Except Loki, every single finale of these MCU shows sucked. Okay, Hawkeye was okay, but Hawkeye was not that good of a show overall. And honestly, this may be the worst offender. The final episodes of this show is basically just a worthless superhero with all the beams in the sky and all of this type of bullshit that goes with not only MCU but basically all the terrible superhero movies. Yes, I'm looking at you, Suicide Squad, not the James Gunn one. James Gunn made excellent Suicide Squad. Yes, I'm looking at the old one. And honestly, it pisses me off even more because this show was too good for this type of ending. It just seems so disconnected and most importantly, really disappointing. Also, the other part of it, this final episode concludes absolutely nothing. I guess it ends the story of Mark becoming better and better person, but only kinda and not really. It feels like there is more to do with it, and the rest, they didn't even try. Even the final battle is cut. Like, what the fuck happened? We got a lot of bad endings of shows this year. But Jesus Christ, couldn't this be the savior? Like, there won't be a second season. That is the most important part. There won't be a second season of Moon Knight. So why there is no conclusion to anything, basically? Why? For the love of God. At this point, I was honestly going to give this show a 10. Through the first 5 episodes, I had not a single complaint. It was great. It was all exactly how I wanted it to happen. It even exceeded my expectations in some part. But with this ending, 8 out of 10 seems fair. It's definitely worth your time, especially if you are an MCU fan. If you have an opinion that you would like to share, I would be more than happy to discuss this show because definitely an interesting show to discuss.